Hey guys, and welcome back to the Warwick F1 Show podcast. This is the 43rd episode of the 2025 season, and we are back at the studio. So we're back at our home. No more StreamYard podcasts from here. And we are coming with a review episode for the Singapore Grand Prix that happened over the course of the last weekend. We've seen George Russell take a really comfortable victory, all things considered, ahead of Max Verstappen, with Lando Norris embroiled in a bit of team controversy on his way to third. We will be talking about all the events and more, so including a rant about TV direction in this episode. And we are joined by four other people on this pod. We've got 5 people in the studio. Never been done before, so we'll see how it goes. I'm your host for this one, Anwar, and I'm joined by my two co-hosts as usual, Daniel and Lucy. I pointed to the wrong ones as I did that. Here we are. And we're also joined by Andie and Irfan, who are new-time guests onto the show. Yes. So let's get this show on the road. I want to get people's assessment on what they decided this race was going to be in terms of a rating. Out of 1 to 10, Lucy, let's start with you. How good was it?
Terrible. I think it would be fair to say that I did, obviously it's an F1 race, so I'm always going to enjoy watching it. I was bored to tears. In part, this was because of the upcoming rant, not included, TV direction, which seemed intent on not showing us anything interesting. But in part, for a Singapore Grand Prix where the morning of the track seemed to start off damp, there was even talk on the way to the grid that Kimi Antonelli was wondering whether he was going to put on the intermediate tyres, which I fear may have made me a little too enthusiastic for what the race was going to be. McLaren won the constructors, I guess, although not in the way that they would have wanted to. Like, possibly the least optimal way to win a constructors championship. And, the result was fine. Quali was quite interesting. But as Baku taught us, we don't grade this race on quali. I'm going to give it a 3 for the fact that it was a race, but...
Indeed, I can attest to that for sure. Andy, how about you? Where were you? What are you thinking in terms of a rating, and why?
So I think it says a lot that I completely forgot that we clinched the constructors when it happened. I was like, oh cool, we did that. I just forgot that was going to happen. I think when we were doing the watch along, I said the phrase, now it's time to watch paint dry, at least 3 times. When we got to about after the first lap, I was like, okay, now we just need to finish this off in a way. We were cheering at pit stop overtakes, I remember. We were being like, oh my god, is something going to happen here? Slow stops were very exciting, and that was about it after turn 1. Like you say with the TV direction, we didn't see any of the stuff happening at the back because they refused to show us the stuff happening at the back. So I'd probably go for about a 3, maybe a 4, just because the radios were really funny. But I've also never rated a race before, so this is probably not a good start for me. But I'd probably go for about the same, if a little bit more, because I did have fun with the radios.
That was a bit of a highlight. Irfan, how about you? Well, where are we getting more positivity out of this rating, or is it going to be more of the same?
Unfortunately not. Actually, it's Singapore. Like, the thing about 2017 Singapore Grand Prix, it was raining, it was full of drama, it was intense. I thought Singapore was for the intense race, and I was left with quite disappointed, I mean, fair play, everyone was safe, and nobody retired, but in F1 we do need a bit of drama, a bit here and there, and I just felt like it was a straightforward, and wasn't so straightforward for McLaren though, for the constructor win with what happened in the race, but I think they got the job done, and yeah, they can just focus on their individual races and championship. But yeah, Singapore just wasn't it on this year, so I would give it a 3.
Right, so we've had 3 threes in that range. Daniel, I don't imagine you're going to give it anything out above that, really, are you?
I'm going to go so much higher with a 4, Anwar.
Oh, okay, that's a lot of...
Controversial, I know.
A lot of vertical movement there.
Yeah. In fact, It's the first Singapore Grand Prix in history with 0 DNFs.
Oh.
And it
that's
kind
why
of
it was so boring.
it kind of proves that the Singapore Grand Prix kind of thrives on a bit of chaos, that we didn't get. And it probably says something about the state of overtaking in Formula One that it took Isaac Hadjar with an engine issue costing him half a second every lap for him to finally have a decent battle with Fernando Alonso. So it's just kind of the deficit that you need to have to the cars behind to be able to battle them. But there are some races that you do have to suffer in terms of the overall championship picture, because I think although it was a rather dull race, we have had a bit of movement. Norris has closed up to Piastri by a few points, which I think makes it even more interesting going into the next few races. And also the attitude of the drivers has probably shifted after this Grand Prix as well, so there's that to look forward to.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really think I'm going to disagree with anything you've said there. 3 is probably the most fair response. I could see an argument for a 2, but well and truly, that just wasn't enough to really talk about outside of the controversy that we will be talking about later. Before we do that, let's go through our race rundown. So, Daniel, take us away.
Sure, let's do it. Okay, so George Russell won the Singapore Grand Prix after the Mercedes car did a complete 180, just like Hulkenberg on lap 44. In terms of the track characteristics that it favours, it was quite a hot circuit, 80% humidity, allowing Russell to take a scintillating pole lap and eventually the win. And I think you should find someone who's as obsessed with you as the F1 TV direction was with the battle between Max Verstappen and Lando Norris for second place, because it was exclusive, it was for 26 laps, and Max Verstappen won out on that one, and I think even calling it a battle is an overstatement. Norris is in third position. That ensured that McLaren clinched their second consecutive Constructors' Championship in spite of the efforts of Max Verstappen, Red Bull, McLaren's own pit stops, their strategy, their driver engagement rules, the fan perception, recent qualifying and recent races. But well done, McLaren, you did it. Oscar Piastri in fourth place. He was so incandescent with rage over the radio. Rumour has it his heartbeat even rose to 61 BPM, which is a new high for him. Kimi Antonelli in fifth place. He kind of had a quite a two-faced approach to the weekend. He was very aggressive, which cost him in qualifying because he overdrove the car, but then it won him a position in the race when he sent it down the inside of Charles Leclerc, which was payback for Charles Leclerc sending it around the outside of Antonelli at the first corner. Leclerc, I mean, the dialogue in his nightmares has probably switched from box to lift and coast now, because this year he's done a lot of it. Fernando Alonso in P7, what an entertaining race. A slow pit stop. He was held up twice by 2 Alien cars, including the battle of the season with Hadjar. Dropped some of the best radio messages of recent times and then scored points as well. So well-earned driver of the day. Lewis Hamilton's cornering speed really picked up towards the end of the race, mostly because he couldn't slow down. He finished ahead of Alonso, but copped a penalty for reimagining the Marina Bay street circuit layout. Behrman in 9th place. It was his 18th race start, and he's now on 18 points. Which position is he in the Drivers' Championship? 19th, but tied with 18th. In P10, it was 1 point from the back of the grid for Carlos Sainz, because his 11-lap stint on softs meant he was the only one with enough tyre advantage to overtake, because you need seconds of it. Isaac Hadjar on P11, he experienced what it was like to run with a Renault engine in his car after the issues they were having with that engine, but he managed to finish 11th anyway, which is pretty good. Sonoda said he had the worst start of his life, but the middle and the end can't have been much better, considering his teammate lapped him by the end of the race. Lance Stroll took a set of soft tyres, 38 laps, and then he switched on to his 100-lap old mediums, as he called them, but it was only enough for 13th place. It was a quote-unquote home race to forget for Alex Albon in 14th, and not just to forget for him, because I can't really remember anything else from his race either. Liam Lawson in 15th. Prove that I have negative wheel knowledge by finishing 11 positions down from where I predicted him. I blame the strategy. Nico Colapinto, that's a new one. Franco Colapinto took 16th place and a piece of Nico Hulkenberg's front wing from Singapore after he put him in the wall, which Bortoleto saw and decided it wasn't worth it, so he settled for 17th place behind him. Esteban Ocon reinforced the idea that I have negative wheel knowledge by finishing 13 positions below where I predicted he would. In 19th was Pierre Gasly. Alpine changed the floor and suspension, so that's why he started from the pit lane, in case you missed that. those were some really critical changes in key to rocketing out to 19th instead of 20th, which belonged to Nico Hulkenberg, who two-stopped like Gasly and continued his run of no points since his Silverstone podium.
Awesome, thank you, Daniel.
Yeah,
I think
nice.
let's start with the top end of the grid, and particularly George Russell, who kind of came out of nowhere from our perspective on the pod. Lucy, for some reason, chose George Russell to at least on pole and got it right. So I don't really know what future you if you got a time machine, what's going on, Lucy? Talk to me.
There's only two words which I can use to describe this, and that is a skill issue. To be honest, it wasn't based particularly on any particular belief that the Mercs would do particularly well around here. It's more, to be honest, the fact that, although I wasn't surprised when they did, I think kind of after practices and definitely after quali, I felt like I'd been properly vindicated and it hadn't been just kind of luck. I just thought that because it's a circuit where qualifying is so important, and we know that qualifying has always been one of Russell's strengths, I figured that, especially since, McLaren have been struggling a bit. I also thought that Red Bull usually struggle at Singapore, although they didn't as much this year as they have historically. So I kind of thought, if I'm discounting McLaren and Red Bull, who's a driver left who could feasibly claim pole? Well, it's not going to be Ferrari, is it? Oh, let's go George Russell. But no, he had a great race. The power rankings that F1 do at the end of every weekend gave him a 10 out of 10 for basically a perfect weekend, despite his little incidents in practice and the possibility that he might have... There was talk of him being under investigation a bit in quali for something involving something. Not going to lie, I didn't watch Q1, so I can't really fill you in on that. But his race really just very solid. Everyone else was having drama at the first corner, so really by the end of lap 1, he felt like he was already like a year ahead of everyone else, and then just never looked back.
Yeah, Andy, how about you? Were you surprised at how easily he was able to kind of saunter to the front and stay there? He really wasn't under much of a threat from the McLarens behind. Verstappen was kind of keeping them at bay. It was a really comfortable Sunday, wasn't it?
Yeah, I imagine the most comedy came from watching him set 3 fastest laps in a row, knowing who he's being chased by. Because even Max Verstappen remembers who he is, and he's got. If he had George win DRS, I wouldn't doubt that he would have tried something. It was just the fact that George went ahead so much, he just built that gap up to... I was even wondering if he was going for even a pit stop gap at that point because of how much... It was 10 seconds at one point, wasn't it? If not even more. Yeah, so it was I was surprised by where he ended up. I did predict him to finish third, not on quali, but in the race. I thought he'd be somewhere on the podium, but I could have never guessed he was going to get first, just because... Well, I did have faith in Piastri to pull through and get a podium after the drought. But, drought, I think it's been 2 races. I thought he would get somewhere with the car, especially with the pace we've seen from him recently. And also, he tends to spawn on the podium anyway. So I thought he'd get somewhere, but first, literally, I would have called you and said predicting him first, to be honest, but you've proven it. So, congrats.
Yeah, I mean, it comes as a massive surprise. Irfan, how about, in terms of what you expected out of George Russell this weekend, how much of an overperformance is this?
Actually, honestly, when seeing the qualifying on how George Russell did so well and that he got pole position, I didn't also expect him to win, actually. I was expecting Verstappen to continue to hound him down. But after the race start, and he was 2 seconds in the first lap is done, I was okay, yeah, he is controlling it. I remember, I think George Russell won in Las Vegas, maybe it was last year. He also led that thing pole to... He was in his own league. So I think he has those flashes of greatness. That's the thing. We can't count out George Russell's talent, But it's just, he was in his own league. He was smooth sailing, and yeah, Verstappen even couldn't catch him.
In terms of his talent, because we've made a lot of him on this pod saying that if he had a championship winning car, he probably would be in this championship fight, no doubt. Where does he stand for you, Irfan?
So, if he's given a championship car, is that what you mean?
Yeah, we're essentially in the grand order of Formula 1 drivers. Is he in the top 3, let's say?
I would say top 5. I would say George Russell's top 5. I think consistency has to be there, but I don't deny that he is really quick. He is when he is on his own league, I think he can perform, he can fight, he can nudge out everyone, elbow out, and yeah.
Daniel, coming to you now, and this is more, I think, the car side of things here. I guess we kind of, we were the two who were saying Mercedes didn't really stand a chance here. And this was on the basis of the hot conditions, the track layout. What do you think went right for him this weekend? Or do you think this is just the enigmatic nature of the car?
Well, I'll tell you the reason why I didn't predict George Russell in my top 5, and that was Charles Leclerc. Because he was saying going into the weekend that, oh, yeah, we expect to be ahead of Mercedes here. They won't do very well. It's hot conditions. The track characteristics don't really suit them much. Ferrari should definitely have the upper hand. And look how the weekend ended. Both Mercedes drivers ahead of both Ferraris. So I am blaming that on Charles Leclerc for my lack of wheel knowledge.
Hate to be a hater, but why do we trust anything Charles Leclerc ever says about Ferrari anymore?
Well, I tend to inherently trust anything Charles Leclerc says. It might be something to do with his conventional attraction, his facial symmetry or something. I don't know, but he's a very trustworthy guy in my head. Maybe not to you, Lucy. On the Mercedes car, Lando Norris was giving some insight into what the McLarens particularly struggle with, and that was with the front tyres, with getting them into the right working window, firing them up, and that's something that Mercedes are generally better at. And it was also the case in Vegas last year, which it's not too dissimilar to Singapore in terms of the corner characteristics. Obviously, there are many more straights in Vegas, but you know the corners aren't that different, and McLaren kind of have to give up their rear grip on their setup to compromise for the front grip that they need to bite into the corners, because if they don't have the front grip, they're going to crash in Singapore in particular. So that was kind of a strength of Mercedes that allowed them to come to the fore. And also, it's very bumpy in Singapore, just like in Baku. The McLaren doesn't handle very well over the curbs and the bumps, which is something that I thought was true of the Red Bull, but clearly not to the same extent of the McLaren. So it was kind of the perfect storm to create an environment where it doesn't really matter that McLaren were or the temperatures weren't very low, rather. It was just that George Russell did an absolutely phenomenal job in qualifying to do 2 pole laps and leading to the first corner on the clean side of the grid. Easy as that.
Andy, a question to you, because what Daniel said is right, and I think McLaren, as much as they've been dominant this season, I think there are some flaws, is probably a strong word, but some weaknesses in that car that some tracks tend to expose. One thing that didn't really play a role in this race at all was tyre wear. And that's something that, again, me and Daniel talked about on the last pod, saying that was potentially something that might come up because of the high temperature. How surprised were you that this was just such a comfortable one-stop for everyone?
So I'm going to level with you here and say that I only recently learned about the concept of tyre degradation. So I hadn't even really looked into the strategies or anything like that. But the second I heard them say oh no, we're not concerned. Everyone on the radio was saying, no, my tyres are fine. Some of them were even surprised we pit so early. So I did think it was slightly strange, but also I didn't truly pay attention to it because I'm not too locked into the car stuff yet. I'm getting there. This is my first year. I literally recently learned that when they do the different compounds, they can go down the numbers, and I was like, oh, that's fun. They change it depending on the race. Listen, I'm getting there, but I did find it very funny to do with the because obviously McLaren have always had this sort of magic around the tyre water and how they're better with the degradation. So I don't know, but yeah, I don't really have a good answer to that, unfortunately. But
do you think, I guess, as a follow-up to that, is if we had, and I'm not going to go into more technical detail at all, don't worry, don't get scared of that. If this was a 2-stop, for example, do you think Russell potentially would have been under more threat?
Potentially, if only because it could have closed the gap from him to the McLarens mainly, because I do think Verstappen suffers from the car, and the fact that he had to say please help really indicates there was something wrong with the car this weekend. So I feel the second a McLaren got past Verstappen, even if it was through him pitting a second time, one of them had a chance to catch up to Russell, maybe potentially get past him. But I don't trust Norris saying if I got past Verstappen, I would have got past Russell. It's well, you couldn't even get past one of them. So I don't know if we should be saying this. But if there was a 2-stop, then I do potentially see that he could have been under a bit more threat. But they handled their strategy, Mercedes, really, really well, to the point where they weren't a threat anymore. So I think potentially, because I think Verstappen was doing a really good job of holding the McLarens behind, almost like he was on the same team as Russell, to be honest. But
I guess looking forward now, because this is a great success for Mercedes, because Kimi Antonelli also performed pretty well. The question is, with the Mercedes, you see a lot of just flashes in the pan in terms of performance. Russell's got 2 wins this season, and they've come at different points in the year, right? I guess, is this a type of result that is replicable for a team like Merc? Or do you think it's going to be back to the 5th places, 4th places, maybe the odd podium for the rest of the year, until potentially a Vegas, for example?
I'm not going to lie to you, but like I've been a Mercedes fan probably since 2014 when Lewis Hamilton joined. So the way that they've always performed in terms of strategy and how to the Wolf or Bono, I feel like strategy-wise, I think they always had it on lock. Unlike the red counterpart, the Ferraris. We don't talk about that. So
the opposite.
So I believe that even with I think it was even last year they usually get this unlikely podiums and stuff, and it's because of strategies. I believe how they run the team and how they even we are gonna do this. Do not panic. Let's stick to a strategy. Let's go to plan B, plan C until Z, until Z, or whatever it is. So it is the bare is what I expect of Mercedes actually. So I'm not going to be surprised if Mercedes can keep up this form, but knowing how the car performs maybe in different circuits and all, I think they can go for that top 2. Like that. I mean that 2nd place. My bad. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, just an extra addition. I think as well, how Mercedes do. Obviously, in part, it's to do with how the car performs, but also it's got a lot to do with how the other cars are performing. And so I think that while I'm not going to predict a Mercedes win, I'm not going to say there's this race at the season which they're likely to win. I think that this is now 3 races on the bounce that admittedly McLaren did not have such an abysmal weekend as they did in Baku, namely because both of their cars finished. But also they're not as invulnerable. At the start of the season, it really felt like we were it was maybe going to be reverse 2023, but with McLaren. And then, so I think that Mercedes, and I'm talking about Russell, although who knows, chaos could mean that Antonelli wins. But I think that Mercedes have a chance to get more race victories, and Red Bull do as well, because McLaren, for me, going into every race, I mean, I'm still going to keep predicting McLaren 1-2s, but it feels like less of a done deal that they're going to win and take 2 of the 3 podium spots. It feels less like a fight for 3rd in every race and more like an actual, you could actually get some surprise winners.
I think that's a perfect segue to kind of the next kind of segment of this show, which I want to talk about the McLarens and what they kind of put out, because there's a lot to talk about, there's a lot to digest here. Just starting off before, in terms of just the weekend as a whole for McLaren, they've won the Constructors' Championship, as we mentioned prior. Congrats to them. 2nd year on the bounce for them. But it's another performance over the course of this weekend where they weren't as competitive as they were, as Lucy said, earlier in the season. Daniel, is this potentially a sign of the competitive advantage of that McLaren and potentially the result of cutting all development to the car, allowing other cars to really close the gap, namely the Red Bulls and the Red Bull in Verstappen's hands and Merc in the hands of George Russell?
Yeah, it's entirely possible, but obviously those decisions would have been made a long time ago, so they would have been aware of that and they would have possibly been even expecting something like this. But I think it's also important to remember that we have had 3 tracks in a row that do have very niche characteristics, and I know we said that about the last 2 before Singapore, but it's also true of Singapore itself. And I know that we said before Singapore we're going to have to wait until after Singapore, but I think we're going to have to wait until after a more conventional track like Kota. But having said that, it does seem to be that the advantage that McLaren has definitely been whittled for not just one team but 2 teams to have seemingly a faster car, or certainly one. Verstappen's just doing miracles again. To have a faster car than McLaren is, it's not going to worry them exactly, because the constructors is wrapped up and they just have to fight between themselves over the drivers. but it will be. I think it's just the perfect recipe for more entertainment over the course of the year. And I have been thinking, actually, this is getting more and more like 2024, in that Lando Norris is closing the gap at the top of the championship, and it seems like he has the momentum, but other drivers keep getting in the way. That happened last year with Ferrari when he was chasing down Verstappen. They were taking away the point jumps between first and second, so he didn't erode the gap as easily, and it's happening now with Piastri too. Granted, there's less gap to close down, but it's still the case. So yeah, I think it could be good, or it could have other connotations for the championship.
It could definitely swing both ways here, I guess, right? Because you can have cars in the way, and you naturally meet the cars between the two cars. Let's say you have a couple of a Ferrari, maybe a couple of Red Bulls, and then the point swing is a lot bigger, but it can also mean that those higher point positions also get taken by these cars instead of the McLaren. So it can really play both ways. Let's go into some of the meat and the potatoes, the thing that I guess everyone really wants to talk about over the course of this weekend, which was the papaya rules, Norris versus Piastri incident on lap 1, and the fact that they did not do any swaps of the cars. And I'm going to start the discussion with you. I'm going to get you are the product I know. She is a Piastri fan, so I'd love to know what was your perspective on the events.
So, I was saying this off air when I was like, I need to let this not get into my real life. I spend 2 hours at the race, really, really angry, and then I go home and I eat food and I go, this is not affect me really. Like, I need to relax. This is not that serious. I have no stakes in this. But when I was at the viewing, I was really upset. Because I want to give props to Norris here. He had a really good start, launched it from 5th to 3rd. Even if it was sloppy, he didn't end up in the wall. Piastri didn't end up in the wall, even if it was nearly. Like, he did a good job to get from 5th to 3rd, and I do think that should be commended. Like, that's, recovered his qualifying. But I also think that Piastri made a very good point in that, hey, is that cool now? Because he himself got reprimanded in Austria, I think it was. There was one point where he made like a margin move and they went, that was too marginal, remember how we go racing. And I think that warning should have gone for Lando as well after that move of like, if that's what papaya rules are, Piastri going, hey, is it cool that are we doing that now? Is completely justified. And I don't think he cared about the move being done. I think he cared about like, hey, I couldn't do that earlier, why can he do that now? And I also think, I think it was, my boyfriend made a very good point of like, Piastri had a slow stop, they didn't swap him then. So is that now part of racing? I don't think they should have swapped them and there was no reason to, but it does bring up that sort of thing of like, okay, so when is a slow stop part of racing? When is this just a racing incident? And when do we bring in the papaya divine intervention, if you will, of like, we're going to swap you guys or we're going to do something? Like, once again, I want to say, Norris earned his place on the podium and I don't think they should have swapped him because he did a really good job in that turn 1. But I still think that Piastri's like rage, I guess, was very, very justified in terms of, hey guys, like, you said I couldn't do this a couple races ago, why is it cool now? I guess you could say like, oh, they knew they had the constructors wrapped up, but they really didn't, because in Baku it didn't happen, so you never know. They could have both hit the wall then, so what was the difference here? I don't want to say there's a Norris bias, I think there was just the team saw it differently or something like that. It doesn't make them look any better. They didn't celebrate with Piastri on the podium, which I know was because of TV direction, because he was still doing media stuff. But it doesn't make them look good, and there's a reason why a lot of McLaren fans are not celebrating the constructors win too much, because they're just so angry at the whole concept of the papaya rules. And I forgot if it was Stella or Brown, but they did say they were going to continue with the same approach going forward. So we'll see if Piastri disconnects his radio next race, because I can see it happening.
As the other resident Piastri fan on this podcast, I should say I really I'm a Piastri fan in the sense that if it goes down to the wire in Abu Dhabi, I would support him, not in the sense that like if anyone but Piastri wins, I'm gonna like cry.
Yeah.
Basically, I think it. I agree. I'm not mad about that move. Not only because I think it was a great move. Like, I would have been very ecstatic had any other driver pulled it off as well. But also, I think even the whole contact thing, it was clear that Norris... It was basically just what happens when you have 3 cars in a corner that's maximum 2 cars wide. Norris clipped Verstappen and then clipped Piastri. and that was just kind of always going to happen. And I'd rather that happen than just sort of going through in a single file line. Otherwise, we'd have said it was really boring. But yeah, I think that I'm mad. I was thinking about this earlier, and I was genuinely thinking, were it not for the fact that it seems like every single race McLaren say, it's fair, we're all about being fair, I wouldn't care. Like, I would not care if McLaren had just said, no, this race, if it was, I might have been like, okay, well, this is kind of the opposite of the decision you made earlier, like a few races ago. I might have been annoyed, but I wouldn't be annoyed to the extent that I am now. I'm very much, Norris earned that move fair and square, and I think it's just coming off the back of, I think for me, obviously things like Austria, but also off the back of Monza. I'm still a little bitter about that, because I've said it a couple of times before that I think McLaren keep forgetting that they're like now the constructors champions, and they still sometimes act like they're a midfield team with their strategies. And so I feel like that's also kind of the case with this, that it's not, doesn't kind of necessarily matter whether they favour a driver. Obviously I'd rather they didn't, but at the end of the day, Red Bull do it, Mercedes do it, Ferrari would probably do it if they could work out how to favour a driver. Basically every team does it, and so I wouldn't be mad if McLaren did it. I'm mad about the fact that they keep trying to say we're not favouring anyone, and then make decisions which seem to favour a driver. It might be incompetence, they might not be trying to favour someone, but that's also not great.
It's interesting, isn't it? I think there are two elements to it. I think, firstly, I want to push back on the idea that Andy mentioned about the pit stop. I think the fact that people are asking to swap the cars on a pit stop is different to this last situation entirely, because the difference is Norris had that race in Monza wrapped up, and then the team went and screwed it up by put it in jeopardy. I know they did the swap. They put it in jeopardy themselves. The difference in this case, Norris had track position over Piastri the entirety of the Grand Prix, and the only reason why Piastri was ahead at the time was because he had not boxed. It was him going long, and you take that risk of going long in case there's a safety car. If there was a safety car, no one would be saying about swapping cars. There wouldn't be this discussion of, Piastri's been hard done by. It's just a matter of racing. If McLaren did ask to swap Norris back in that case, in this hypothetical scenario, I don't really know what I'd say, to be perfectly honest. I think that's ridiculous. Irfan, how about you? Because we've had the two perspectives of the Piastri fans. You're coming from a neutral background of being a Merc fan, I guess.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on this? Was this all fair? Was it fair in racing, or do you think that Piastri does have a reason to feel hard done by?
I mean, it was definitely a bold move from Norris, for first corner, and then, they didn't have any space as well. So I was on the fence. I'm like, hey, actually, it's not cool. But once adrenaline starts, Piastri was feeling the adrenaline. Of course, he felt frustrated. He was talking non-stop on the radio, like, hey guys, so that's cool, guys? That's cool? Yeah, okay. Yeah, but it's just, I think it was, for me, I thought it was okay, but it's just, Piastri felt a little let down, actually, by the team. So I guess that's what he felt. But honestly, I don't think he's mad about the track position or anything. I think he's just, guys, so you're just gonna let Norris, okay, cool, yeah.
I think he was very noticeable here in the fact that, and this is the most animated Piastri's ever been on the radio, right?
Exactly.
Is that a different side of Piastri that we've not seen before in your eyes?
Actually, I want to comment on that. I would always think it was like a cool as cucumber, but I think this is where he realized there's only around 6 races left, right? And he realized he's in the lead and he has control in it. So I think this is where you determine whether to be the good teammate or the champion, So you can't be both. I'm so sorry. And that's how Verstappen won. That's how maybe Hamilton won by 1 point that time. But it's either or. You can't be both.
I was gonna say that when I would have been like reminded of this would be maybe like Silverstone after the penalty, or maybe even in Monza after the swap. In Monza, he was a bit more like, oh, so I thought this was part of racing, but okay, I'll do it. If I feel like genuinely, if they ask him to swap again, he's not gonna do it. I don't see a world in which they asked him to swap with his championship rival and he's just going to take that. I don't think he will, because I mean he's got a contract for at least next year, no need to worry about signing a sort of deal, and he needs to win the championship because he's leading and he said he'd be going flat out into Abu Dhabi, and I think that means I'm not going to give track position to my rival just because he had a slow stop like in Monza or because something happened. Like I genuinely see him going, no, I'm not swapping, and we'll talk about it later, but I'm not doing that now.
Interesting, Daniel. Where do you stand on this? Because I am inclined to agree that this should be the end. If I'm Piastri, this should be the end of any type of discussion about track team orders or swaps.
Yeah. And there was a rumour, actually. There is a rumour that Lewis Hamilton actually went up to Oscar Piastri after the race. I don't know if you guys heard this, but kind of gave him some advice about kind of don't follow the team orders situation anymore. And this is coming from Lewis Hamilton, who was known as the master of mind games against Nico Rosberg, that kind of thing. So from that perspective, I don't know if he's going to take his advice or not. I think Piastri is going to find it really hard to disobey the team because he's just not that kind of guy, I think. And that's something that he might really struggle with. So I'm not sure if he even knows if it's the end of the team order saga or not. He'll probably judge it on a case-by-case basis. Obviously, the closer we get to the end of the season, the less likely he is to do that sort of thing. And yeah, in this scenario, I think it was just kind of... If we look at the driving standards guidelines, Norris did have the right to that corner. I know those guidelines are kind of construed and they're not the greatest kind of measure of wheel-to-wheel racing, but Norris had his front wheels at least alongside the mirror of Oscar Piastri, so he was entitled to that room. Oscar really wasn't. I know that Norris didn't mean to barge him off the road, but it kind of was his corner by the point that the work that he'd done on the brakes. So I think I understand Oscar's frustration entirely, and especially from his perspective in the cockpit, where he can't even see necessarily at the start of the race that Norris has made contact with Verstappen. But yeah, it's going to make it... I don't know, honestly, what he's going to do in the future. I think because we haven't seen Oscar Piastri in this position before.
Yeah, I think what you made there is a very good point. I think I made this point a lot earlier on in the season about the fact that we've never seen Oscar Piastri interact in a title challenge. We've seen how Norris operates. We've not seen Piastri do the same. So it's going to be interesting to see how he reacts to this, something like this, because I think from his perspective, he can feel wronged all he wants, but ultimately, I personally think he was caught a little bit napping at the start, and I feel it was like ultimately, I understand the team game side of things. I think the gloves should be off now. I think if I'm either one of those two, Norris or Piastri, I wouldn't be particularly receptive to any team order stuff. Like, I could just about get on board with giving a toe in like Q2, for example. Just about, but I don't think outside of that, it shouldn't extend further. I think these two drivers should be... Now the Constructors is wrapped up, there's no benefit of getting a bigger lead in the Constructors. There's no financial benefit for McLaren to do so. I think these two need to fight for themselves here. And there's ultimately a 22-point gap in the championship now. That gap has narrowed by not a lot, 3 points over the course of this weekend. And I think it should be race by race. They need to work on that by themselves, because I don't really see any other reason to continue operating in the way they are. I was a bit... When Andy mentioned about... She thought Zach Brown or Andrea said that they'd continue operating the way they did. I think it was Stella who said it. I was really disappointed that he'd said that. I don't see any benefit for McLaren to continue in this way. I don't know if anyone agrees. Is there any benefit?
I also don't see any benefit for McLaren to continue operating in this way, kind of not only in terms of the sort of driver championship dynamic, things like that, but I also think that long term, it is far worse for McLaren that Piastri now, if he does think this, I think he probably does, even if kind of it's only to a small sense, feels like, even in some small way, that the team is not listening to him or not giving him the grace he needs as the title leader. It hurts them far more long term that he thinks that than, we saw in Canada, that's the kind of the main time that the McLarens have had a little collision. And kind of the way that they dealt with that as teammates afterwards is that, admittedly, that one, it wasn't like a double DNF or anything, but Norris kind of took accountability basically sort of about like 5 minutes after the race had ended. I think that as a teammate dynamic, they could probably, Norris and Piastri as teammates could probably survive being allowed to race each other, just do whatever the hell you want. But they probably, I think it will be much harder for their dynamic and, more importantly, their trust in the team to survive something which does feel ultimately manufactured. I think it probably says something that overtake at the start was the most fun I've had watching the McLarens this whole season. It's the one time that they've ignored the papaya rules. They're just stupid. Please get rid of them. They have a stupid name and they're just stupid.
Irfan, do you think they've boxed themselves into the corner here in terms of these papaya rules? It feels like it's caused them a lot more pain than it has gain. I don't know if that's your assessment.
I would say not actually. I mean, they are the Constructor Champions 2 times in a row. So, hey, they must be doing something right with that papaya rules. But it's just now that it's finished, there's no nice guys in F1. I don't believe in that. Since Michael Schumacher days, or even Hamilton or Vettel, and then we're coming to the 2020s. Verstappen wasn't a nice guy, Like in on track, you have to own it, and I think that this could be the start of maybe Piastri villain arc, where he really don't listen to order or anything. It's because I think his own legacy is on the line. He's leading the championship with 22 points to go. There is not much else to lose when you've already been the Constructor Champions this year. It's just one more title to go. So,
Daniel, let's just look at the overall scene of the championship at the moment, because Piastri has now dropped points to Norris in each of the last 3 races, if I'm not mistaken. He dropped points here, 3 points here, dropped points in Baku because of his retirement, and he dropped points in Monza as well. Is this trend making it a bit more interesting? How is this trend concerning for Piastri, do you think, in terms of he's continuing to chip away? We've got 6 races plus a few sprints to go. Is this cause for concern, I guess?
I think it is now. I don't think it was before the race in Singapore, because historically Lando Norris hasn't made up 2 positions at the start, and historically the start at Singapore has been very crucial. So he would have been thinking, if I can just get ahead of my teammate going into the end of the first lap, for example, I should be able to put points on him. But the fact that he hasn't done that, it's going to start to become not a panic, because I don't think that's Oscar Piastri's way, but he is losing bit by bit that reputation for being that ice cool, so laid back, he's horizontal kind of guy, because of these past 3 races specifically. Monza, he would have felt disadvantaged. Baku was entirely his fault, but that it's not like that's a positive for him. And Singapore, he felt like that wasn't his fault either. So from that perspective, the team are kind of, he feels like the team necessarily, not that they don't want him to win, but that he feels like in this race they were not in his corner, because papaya rules, right? He's always said there's only one papaya rule, which is don't crash. And at the end of the day, when they made contact, he felt like it was violated. So that was the most obvious slam dunk, oh, we'll switch the positions then, because he's just crashed into me to take the position. So it's understandable that he feels hard done by. And although we have seen from Lando Norris that he doesn't historically cut down these huge deficits, loads and loads of points at a time, so I think from that perspective he's got a bit of insulation. But also, if you think about it, Lando Norris in Zandvoort, that retirement was not his fault. If he hadn't retired and he had got those 18 points, the gap would only be 4. And I know it's ifs, buts and maybes, but it's a case of he could be right here with me, and he still can be by the end of the year. And I need to make sure that can't happen, whatever means possible.
Look, it's a long way to go, isn't it? 6 races. It might feel like a short turnaround, but the points when you can get over the course of the 6 plus the couple of sprint races we've got could be quite monumental. So I think it's, from a championship perspective, just no kind of biases aside, I guess. This is interesting, the fact that he is continuing to chip away. This position of stability that Piastri had a few weeks ago is weakening bit by bit. So we'll see how that progresses. Let's move on from the McLaren debacle of this weekend onto some more positive news in terms of some of the better performers over the course of this weekend from the midfield. And I want to talk about someone who had a very enjoyable weekend as a spectator. Probably had all types of roller coaster emotions in the car, and that is Fernando Alonso, because he had a rant on the radio, told his team not to talk to him, proceeded to give them a nice soliloquy midway through, even though they were not allowed to say anything to him. Ended up bagging driver of the day. What a performance.
That's how I feel every time I'm on this podcast. But no, as Fernando Alonso said, trophy for the hero of the race. He made some killer overtakes. It was one of them, admittedly, against a guy whose engine was actively falling apart. Yes, but an overtake's an overtake, and it's Singapore, so I didn't think that would happen. But no, he seemed to have a roller coaster of a time. I think Andy mentioned it earlier. The radios were the main interesting part of the race. I think he deserved driver of the day purely for those. But yeah, I think Aston Martin they're one of those teams that always seem to end up like P2, P3 in practice, and then come qualifying they're like 16th. But nevertheless, they know how to make a race a fun time, and sometimes you just need silence to get on with the job that you're trying to do. And so props to him for bringing home some points as well.
And Andy, he wasn't the only Aston Martin to really have entertainment, was he? Because Lance Stroll also decided to have some fun. Are they the most entertaining driver pairing on the radio?
For this race, yes, if only because Norris didn't say much. If he had, then I would have said the McLarens would have had the most, purely because the emotion in Piastri's were just incredible. But I'd say for this race, definitely. Usually I really have fun with the Ferraris because they're always crashing out over something or other. I'm not sure if you guys have seen the meme of that, like, the really long Leclerc crash out when they put it over, like, the stall with music. That type of thing. But yeah, I think Fernando had a couple highlights there. I think he just had fun with that race, to be honest, even if he was like, don't speak to me. Because just let him get on with it, man. He did get points, didn't he?
Yes.
Okay. I forget where they all ended up in the end, to be honest.
He got 7.
Congratulations.
What a man.
Exactly.
Closed down a 45-second gap on Lewis Hamilton in 2 laps.
And by the way, I called that from the very as soon as it happened on the watch along. I said, "Okay, it's happening," and he missed out on track by 4/10. But then the penalty saved him. But good result for Aston Martin. I think some of these positive results coming out of them gives me a little bit of a hope going into 26. I am aware that they always seem to disappoint, but
They've got Adrian Newey now. I mean, they do have. I at least have confidence that he's got some clipboard somewhere drawing something, making things faster.
Yeah, I think things are looking a little bit better for Aston Martin than they probably did a few months ago, I guess. Another driver that I kind of wanted to point out before I get onto my soapbox about TV direction over the course of the Sunday was Kimi Antonelli. We highlighted him on this pod a few weeks ago, me and Daniel, saying that he was a guy who probably needed a few good results under his belt. He had a really poor European circuit, essentially. But last couple of races, he has picked his form up. Irfan, is this something that you kind of expected out of him? Is this like business as normal now for Kimi Antonelli?
Wow, business as normal. No, he's a rookie. Let's give him some time to develop. Let's give him some time. He has that raw talent, of course. I mean, he's replacing Lewis Hamilton, by the way. So he has that, something to fill. So I think that I think a good result for him as a rookie is like 5th, 6th, 5th, 4th. Even I think he had a podium this season as well.
Yes, he has.
Yeah. So I think it's a success, by the way. But it's just that he just needs to keep up the consistency, and that's how you grow as a driver. As the season goes by, you grow and you fit into the team better, and that's how you get on with that. Yeah.
Yeah, overall, you can't really complain for 5th place for a guy who really has struggled over the last few weeks.
Exactly.
I'm very it's good to see, because I think a lot of people were thinking, okay, is this seat under threat? Which I found ridiculous. I think that was a very early reactionary take in my eyes, but I'm glad that he's kind of putting those struggles behind him.
Yeah, I agree, and I also think as well, as a rookie, you want to have a good driver in the other seat to learn from. In some ways, that's why I kind of think that Hadjar's been so impressive this season, because he's kind of basically after 2 races had to be the first driver. But Antonelli, I think as well, kind of therefore almost kind of props to Russell as well for his consistency, that kind of that's sort of a driving style. In part, this is also because Antonelli has a good natural driving style as well, but that's something that he can sort of follow and learn from. I agree. I kind of thought it was stupid when everyone was like, "Oh, his seat's under threat," or was there some rumor he was going to get loaned to Alpine or something?
Yeah, that was on the board.
That was on the board. Nobody deserves Alpine. That's I think the best thing that happened to Jack Doohan was not having to deal with that anymore. But I'm happy he's having a turnaround. But yeah, I'm hoping it continues just for his confidence. But also, I don't think he needs it. He is a rookie at the end of the day. Let's cut him some slack.
Slack needs to be given to someone like him ultimately. Right, rant time. So I don't normally come on my soapbox on this pod. I'm normally a really level-headed guy. I'm sure my 2 co-hosts are agreeing. I'm glad I'm getting thumbs up from Lucy. Daniel was shaking his head, nonplussed. But I have something that I was really unhappy about over the course of the Sunday, and that was TV direction. It was absolutely appalling, and when I tell you the standard has been slipping over the last few years in this manner, in this regard, it's really this is the worst it's been. I cannot believe that we watched about 30 laps of Verstappen versus Norris, which proceeded not to even result in an overtake. It's horrible. We missed out Carlos Sainz. I know Lucy was really upset about not seeing her favourite team have some degree of success, and we missed all of that out because apparently McLaren and Norris really wanted to overtake Verstappen, and that didn't even flipping happen. Honestly, I'm so mad. Yeah. And not only that, we missed out on Alonso versus Hamilton, which was over the course of 3 laps, went from 45 seconds to 4/10. Yet we saw absolutely nothing of it. Zero. We saw no footage of it, no replays, they have picture-in-picture as part of this year, yet they proceeded not to even use it. I don't understand it. Honestly, I think a blind monkey could probably do a better job than whatever frauds are in that TV direction box right now. They need to be sacked. We need to replace them with some kids who need work experience. The job market is horrible at the moment. Give someone who's on a placement year course that job. Because I promise you now, they would do a better job than whoever's currently doing it. I don't care about seeing drivers' families. I remember seeing Lawrence Stroll's grandson in the garage. I'm going to be honest, I don't really care. Kids are cool, but I want to see racing. If I wanted to watch baby videos, I'd go on TikTok. But I don't want to watch baby videos. I want to watch racing, and we didn't see that. So my head's kind of gone. My head's at Mars. So I'll give someone else the opportunity to speak whilst I calm down.
I genuinely think that the only reason we saw Nico Hülkenberg spin was because Max Verstappen and Lando Norris were coming up to have that group of cars. Honestly, I say this as somebody who has a tendency to crop half my face out of any photo I take. I could have done a better job than that. I used to have a little camera, those little pink cameras. I can't remember who made it. but like those little ones where you could like put the little colourful frames around any picture that you took, and it took it in like 3 pixel quality. And I think had I stood there taking some photos, I would have captured the essence of the race more. Yeah, I mean, also because obviously it's good to watch a tense battle, and I understand that if it seemed like something that might go back and forwards, why they might want to focus more on the front of the field, particularly if Verstappen is sort of implicated in the championship fight. But I think it was perfectly obvious after about 4 laps, that Norris was not going to be able to overtake Verstappen. Or if he was, it was going to be because Verstappen had some sort of lock-up or some sort of error. And that gives, like, that lock-up time gives you enough time to switch cameras back to that camera. There was enough time for us to watch a Williams making some beautiful overtakes. Well, I assume they were beautiful overtakes. I just saw a lot of numbers on a screen. Yeah, I think that if you track my eye movement, I spent more time watching the timing towers than the actual screen. So I'm also passionate about it, but Anwar has said a lot of the things which I've already been thinking, so I will also not continue to rant.
Daniel, anything to add from this rant quickly before we move on to predictions?
At least we know what Carlos Sainz's girlfriend looks like. But that's about all the constructive feedback I have.
Sorry, I just also want to add, like, the Carlos Sainz thing. Didn't he went from like 18th to 10th or something?
Yes!
Yeah.
Right?
Yes!
Didn't see any.
You didn't see anything, right? Am I right to say that? And the thing is, instead of watching the timing, I was actually watching the race, right? But I was like, wait a minute, why was Sainz 10th again? And he was one of the 50 laps. I think he took, the first stint was like 50 laps. So that was impressive. I thought, show some of it,
I have seen some of the overtakes that Carlos Sainz pulled off, and they were pretty impressive.
Why didn't we see them?
Including a great borderline dangerous battle with Yuki Tsunoda, which would have been great to see live. However, watching it on YouTube about 3 days after the race kind of took all the jeopardy out of it, and it was flat.
Yeah.
I'm going to start crying.
Yeah, it was not a good... We've said enough, I think. We've made the message clear. Let's move on to the predictions quickly before we round up the show. Let me kick us off because I don't think I had a lot of success on my end. I said Piastri pole, did not happen. I said Piastri wins, did not happen. Norris second, I get a point there because I was one position off. George Russell finished third, got no points because he finished first. Leclerc fourth, it was what I said. Verstappen, I said fifth. I get points for none of that, so 1 point for me so far. Daniel, did it get any better for you?
Absolutely not. Pole for Norris, no. P1 Norris, no. P2 Piastri, no. P3 Verstappen, which is a point.
Yep.
P4 Lawson, no. P5 Ocon, absolutely not.
Lucy, you go for it because I think you're going to have a lot more joy.
For those of you who are new listeners to the podcast, this is the first time that I've ever had an actually successful predictions time. So I will continue to flaunt this for the rest of the year. I said Russell on pole, so 3 points. Is that 3 points for me, Anwar?
Yes, it is.
I said P1 Norris, did not happen. I deluded myself that there might be some overtakes. There weren't. I said P2 Russell, though, so I get a point for being close on that, at least. I said P3 Antonelli, no, because he was in P5. Although I did kind of follow through on my prediction that he'd have a fairly good weekend. P4 Piastri, beautiful 3 sweet points for me for getting that one perfectly right. And P5 Leclerc, which I get a point for because he finished 6th.
Honestly, this might be the most successful Lucy's ever been on predictions. Normally it's a 0 point.
I can't stop smiling.
I'm glad to witness it.
Yeah, it's like witnessing history. It won't happen
It
again.
will never happen again. It's like a solar eclipse.
Let me quickly go through my DNF and random prediction. I got neither of them. I don't think Daniel got either of his either.
I
Right.
forgot neither of mine.
Okay, we'll get this done really quickly and then close out the show. So we got a DNF for Colin Pinto with what I said. We got no DNF, so nothing there. 2 safety cars, we had none. Daniel, move on.
Okay, DNF, Sainz, no. Random prediction. It'll be the longest race of the season by at least 5 minutes, and it fell short of being the longest race of the season, I worked out, by 1 minute, 43 seconds, 937 milliseconds. So not even the first half of the prediction came true.
No, disappointing. And Lucy?
I said DNF Alonso. He actually didn't DNF. He was hero of the race. And I said my random was has double points. We got 1 hat. Haas got 2 points.
That's not a
But
double
no.
point, shut up. That's
But
shady.
no, Ocon was in like 18th, so I don't get points for that.
And that brings us to the end of this podcast episode. I want to thank my guests and my hosts, so Lucy, Daniel, Andie, and Irfan for coming on. It's been great fun having 4 people beside me, essentially. We'll be back at some point next week to preview the upcoming American Grand Prix on the streets of Austin. Well, not streets, on the permanent track of Austin.
Whoa!
I can't wait for a
And a
permanent
sprint
track.
race as well.
With a sprint race. Good mention. We're going to be
Lots of
in
points up
the
there.
Clarendon next week for our watch along. So feel free to join us there. It should be a great atmosphere if you all come along. So please do. Well, but that is the end of the episode. I've been your host, Anwar, and we'll see you in the next episode. Goodbye.